Well, hello everyone. Welcome back to another episode with Espresso with Matt. I'm here with my good friend Ryan Stevens. Ryan, good to see you today. How are you doing today?
Good morning, Matt. It's great to be here. Too blessed to be stressed. It's an awesome opportunity to chat with you and talk about some really cool stuff.
So I'm looking forward to it. Ryan, you are a dynamic people leader, a coach. You have your own consultant business. You have a lot to get into. I'm really excited about today. But I want to make sure I'm good and caffeinated before we get that conversation going. So our first question we start with any guest right now is, what you got in the cup there? What are you drinking today?
Well, I've got my Anchor cup here, my favorite mug. Um, it is Arabica coffee. It's like a morning blend. I
Very
love
cool.
it. It's like a sweet, floral thing. It's funny because I've never really been into coffee. Talk to anyone who's known me the rest of my life. They're like, "You drink coffee now?" Because I've never really drank coffee. And it wasn't until recently this past fall that I went to the Starbucks experience in New York and
Okay.
like went through a tasting experience of black coffee with the Chemex. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is really good. And I like craft beer, so I understand like the flavor profiles and whatnot.
Yeah.
And like ever since then, I've been able to drink black coffee, and now I only drink black coffee. I don't typically put the chocolate and the sugars in it like I
Yeah.
used to just to make it palatable. So yeah, I'm actually a coffee drinker now, which is funny because I haven't been my whole life. So
Well, I have my traditional Cafe Bustelo. I'm still looking for the Cafe Bustelo sponsorship if you're out
you're gonna
there.
get
One
it.
day maybe. Ryan, I love the mug. It's like an old school. I'm at a diner or a home
hmm
mug. That mug needs like the Sunday newspaper with it, right? I mean, like you need like
Yeah.
that's an old school. I'm gonna have a cup of coffee mug. That's
Yep.
awesome. And
Hey,
I tell
anchor, refuse to sink.
there you go.
Stay grounded and stay under control in rocky waves.
Very cool. And you're right. Yeah, I think when you start getting into coffee, you start getting to like those floral sense, and like you
hmm
can really tell that it really makes a difference. And
Yeah.
I want to go back to my one thing. I want to go back to my college self and say, Matt, knock off the Mountain Dew. This is a better product for you. But maybe that's the first thing I give my college advice for. But I am so excited for you being here today, and we have a lot to get to today. So let's just jump right into that. Ryan, your career, I mean, your background and your experience is so varied. Just take everyone who's out there in the audience a little bit through your expertise, a little bit through your journey. 'Cause I think it's a fascinating journey. I really do. So can we talk about that for a little bit?
Absolutely. I'm just so thankful for all the opportunities that I've had throughout my career. Not only am I a licensed healthcare provider, which I've been for over 20 years, certified fitness coach as well for nearly 20 years, but my real foundation, my love, my passion, and where I've really grown in my career is in the realm of like leadership, people operations, interpersonal skills, and ultimately if I think about like my why statement, I always like to embrace challenge and growth opportunities so that I can position myself in a way that I can help others recognize, achieve, and celebrate their potential. That's like everything I do kind of centered around that. And it's been quite a journey over the last 15 years of discovering that why and kind of getting to the root of it of how can I make a positive impact with what I do. And I've been just really blessed to have climbing leadership roles in really amazing healthcare systems. Still being a practicing clinician to this day, even though a majority of my business is coaching and consulting, working with business leaders to help them create an awesome workplace experience and just improve those team dynamics. But I still love to practice healthcare. So I get to keep my feet in that area as well too. Four kids, proud dad, proud Penn State alum. I love to be outdoors, do hiking, all sorts of thing, and I am a professional wrestling junkie, admittedly. So,
I, we'll stop there for a second. Good. Thank you for admitting that. As am I. I mean, I will say this too. So, oh my God, you got the belt and everything. That's awesome.
I mean, I have to be on brand. I have to. I give this to my clients that I work with when we do workshops, and it's a fun little prop.
It is a good. I rediscovered my passion for wrestling over the years. I was a high school wrestler, like the traditional wrestler, and that was my favorite sport. But I love the drama of it and the showmanship of it, and
hmm
it's great. Ryan. athletic trainer, you're getting back to that, and I
Hmm.
got to tell you, I played football in college. I
Hmm.
spent a lot of time in the training room. I love that parallel to being that into a coach. I
Hmm.
mean, because that ground of that training others, getting into that piece of it, it fits so great into leadership, doesn't it?
Hmm.
I mean, those
Yeah.
foundations you have. So talk a little
Mhm.
about that. Like, where do you feel the parallels between being an athletic trainer and that clinical background has kind of led you to these leadership roles throughout your career and to coach other leaders? What
Yeah.
happened there? And talk a little bit about that.
It's a great point, Matt, and there are so many parallels. If you look at allied healthcare and you look at the profession of athletic training, which is basically you're a bridge builder between the stakeholder, the people that you care for, the patients, the student athletes, the active persons, and not only providing direct care yourself in the realm of, you know, sports medicine care, emergency response, orthopedic, musculoskeletal stuff, exercise related illness, but you're also a bridge in facilitating referrals. And I've, throughout my entire career, I've just really spent a foundation of my work on building relationships with local resources so that when I needed to call on them, when I needed to make a referral, I could make that happen in the best interest of those that I was taking care of. And, when you talk about from a leadership perspective, thinking big picture while staying grounded, I like to call it head in the clouds, feet in the dirt. One aspect of that is taking an emergency action plan approach to situational preparedness. And that's what athletic trainers do. Because you're thinking about what might happen, how can I plan for it appropriately, and putting things in place so that when the emergency or the high stress situation happens, it's a little easier to manage because you've prepared for it, you've practiced it, you've repped it out. And that's one thing I really bring in from the world of athletic training. Now, of course, I've had extensive leadership development experience as well too. My master's degree is in humanistic and multicultural education. I've had years of training under the Dale Carnegie training systems as well as high reliability organization systems for about 5 years. Simon Sinek Start with Why and Lean Six Sigma, a bunch of other, a whole salad of those that I kind of mesh together and make my own approach. But as a healthcare provider, and then also my career as a fitness coach, I really had to develop the people skills to be able to deliver what I know in here so that it can best be received and absorbed and followed by the people I'm trying to guide, the patient I'm caring for, if I'm on the fitness side of it, the client that I was working for. And then as I grew over the last 15 years into leadership roles, then it came from switching from caring for that patient to providing my an environment for my team to thrive at their top level so they can best provide care for that patient or for that fitness client or for anyone that they serve.
Yeah, and let's talk about that because I think there's such great metaphors there and such great discussion. And you talk a little about your leadership model. And I just want to go back to one thing you talked about a little bit about
Sure.
when you work with teams or you work with individuals in healthcare. You know, I worked in a psychiatric hospital for many, many years, and I used to tell people it's an honor to work with people during some maybe their toughest days of their lives. And I think, when you're working in athletic training, you have, whether it's athletes or individuals who are coming back from a traumatic injury, they probably don't see the potential of getting better. They're just in their own reality sometimes. And I find that metaphor, that parallel for leadership so clear. you know
Hmm.
that and I think it goes right to what you're talking a little bit about your feet grounded and in the clouds because whether you're training people or you're working in healthcare, you have to see this potential of getting better. And a lot of the time in
Hmm.
leadership, you're dealing with the things that happen every day. That's the management of the leadership, right?
Right.
But you also see a potential in the team members you work with and where they can go. And I think that metaphor is so awesome. And so talk a little bit about that because you kind of said that's one of your key pillars for leadership approach. It's
Right.
really this concept of, you talk about head in the clouds, which I like, and
Hmm.
feet on the ground. So talk about that a little bit, how that metaphor works throughout your leadership development and coaching approach.
Absolutely. Yeah. That is one of the key pillars when I'm coaching the leaders and I'm working with teams to it's that situational awareness, really.
Yeah,
Um, Head in the clouds concept is basically big picture thinking. You're envisioning the future. It's strategic thinking, innovation, the vision that you have for your organization, being adaptable and understanding trends, kind of seeing what's out there on the horizon. But then you also have feet in the dirt, which is grounded in reality and present, understanding your current challenges, your current operations, what's right in front of you. And it's just something that always just really, that concept just always really resonated with me and kind of guided me as I climbed the leadership ladder in middle management. And that's why I think middle management is really the heroes of the organization in a lot of cases,
absolutely.
because you have to be big picture thinking and understand what's going on above you. You have to shield your team at times from some of that stuff coming down, and reframe it in a way, being transparent as much as you can and appropriately, but then also understanding what they're dealing with on the front lines. And providing that service. That's very much head in the clouds, feet in the dirt leadership as a middle manager, as a middle leader. So that's really kind of where the foundation is. And one of the things that really reinforces is this concept called the Stockdale paradox. You might have read about it in Good to Great, the book by Jim Collins. It's really just this powerful mindset. I think it was Admiral James Stockdale. He was at Hanoi Hilton. He was a captive, POW, and it really is basically maintaining hope while you are dealing with the brutal realities in front of you.
Yeah.
And that really kind of sums up and kind of modified taking that Stockdale approach. That Stockdale paradox is like a kind of a foundation of my big picture thinking, grounded focus of head in the clouds, feet in the dirt, because it's just so powerful when you have that strong belief and you're hopeful and optimistic, but also practical and realistic about what's going on. That can help frame your actions through a lot of really challenging times, but also allow you to keep moving forward and not get stuck.
Right. First of all, we anyone out there who's in that middle management role, rewind that section, listen to that again, because that is perhaps one of the best explanations of what the reality is when you're in that leadership role.
Hmm.
When you're in that space where you have to be in both worlds, God, that's a challenge. And I gotta tell you,
Yeah.
in my experience, I would say my first leadership job was probably my most difficult one
Hmm.
in understanding that realm of the nuance of what was going on in the environment and to what was happening. I'll tell you a really brief story. I think it's all really funny. I think anyone who's middle management will appreciate this. One of my favorite nurse leaders I worked with, um, oversaw an addiction program. She was I think she used to say a reformed nun. She was a nun at one point, got into addiction services. She did a great job,
Wow.
wonderful to talk to. And I was talking to her about, what was the challenge of the job? And she said, Matt, today I spent on my first meeting today was with environmental services and food services about who was going to wipe down the tables after meal times. With the nursing staff, with the housekeeping staff, we had this discussion. I went right from there to a board meeting where they're talking about a new app, a new strategic vision for addiction services in the nation. So I went from wiping tables down to strategic planning within an hour. And man, does that not just talk about that leadership role when
Hmm.
you're in that role where you're dealing with the nuance of, okay, this, go into this, and you got to be in both. Both are equally important,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so what a great concept. I think in your experience, I mean, you had tons of experience leading teams doing that. What's a good example you had of kind of balancing those two worlds as a leader? How did you deal with that?
It is challenging at times when you're in that role of working for a larger organization. You have a team that's committed to doing what you're doing in service line. Um, and one challenge a lot of middle management, little middle leaders face is they drift too far to one side or the other and get stuck there. So drifting too far to big picture thinking, but you would kind of ignore or don't deal with the stuff going on. You're like, yeah, that'll be taken care of, or I'm just gonna focus on this and I'm going to let them take care of that, which is great and really important to do if you have a team that's set up to be able to do that as a leader. You've set up that autonomy and structure and empowered them to do it. But if you just do that just because you don't want to deal with that stuff, that's a challenge. And on the other end, and this is where my flaw really came in when I launched my first business, is feeling like you have to do everything. You kind of get stuck in the dirt. And when I launched my first business, it was a brick and mortar fitness and wellness center back in 2014. I was vice president, co-founder. I had to do it all. And I didn't do a good enough job of building systems. And as we grew our team to around 30 people, empowering them as much as they could have to do a lot of the little tasks that I felt that I had to do. And so I got so bogged down in the daily operations that I missed some of the big picture stuff, which ultimately led the business to fail. And I learned a ton from that experience. That really shaped my leadership style in my next role, where I led a large team of sports medicine professionals, about 40 professionals across 14 locations. And we established small group, like employee resource groups, but focused on different aspects of running the department so that they were all empowered to do those things that brought us all along together. And I wouldn't have thought of doing that or adapted to doing that if I wouldn't have made the mistake of being too stuck in the dirt during my business venture.
Wow. Well, Ryan, thank you for the transparency. And from a leader who's never made a mistake, it's glad I'm joking, of course. You know, because I think about that, and I think those evolutions on both ends of it. I've made both mistakes. It's funny
Mhm.
because I've definitely been too detail oriented. I definitely been too much in the strategic plans, and it really is that incredible balance act. And I think where the learning comes, at least for me as a leadership, is when you start kind of fighting that and you kind of start embracing it and saying, this is the job. This is what it means. And
Yeah.
it does mean that I'm in both worlds. It does mean I have to do both things. You talked about the empowerment of others.
Hmm.
And I want to talk about that a little bit because, you're so positive, your energy you bring. I've seen your content, your speaking engagements, even from the athletic training aspect of it. You're not going back on that field. You're not going to, come back from that injury, but you're getting people to that point. How do you develop your team? What are some of the key concepts when you're working with a client, you're working with a leader, you're doing coaching, and they're struggling with this idea of developing their team, that trust, all those things that go into it? How do you approach that? How do you kind of coach people to get better at delegating and making sure that they're managing the day-to-day operations?
That's a great question, and it is not simple. I had actually had a great question, a great conversation yesterday with a prospect that I'm talking in talks with about helping to support their team, and they asked me that question of, if we've got 40 people in the room, how can we connect with everyone individually and give them what they need to be a better communicator? And it came back to empowerment and presenting ideas, but also making sure that your team is open to those ideas. And the foundation, what I feel, the foundation of being a catalyzing leader is own your spark. It's education of self. You have to know yourself better than anyone else. As a leader, you have to know yourself better, but then also, if you're not in a leadership role, you need to know what your strengths are. You need to know to check your ego at the door at times to accept feedback, but also to speak up when you have a concern. And as a leader, when I think about my kind of what principles guide me as a leader, it's compassion, agility, and care. As a leader, I want to show those three things. It's relationship development, building bridges between not just the team members that I have and creating raving fans internally, which is another component of I feel being a great leader is you can create those raving fans on your team. But also you need to rally others around a shared vision. And especially when the stakes are high, that's really important. And the only way that you can do that is by understanding what's in it for them. Why would they believe in this mission? How can I connect with them so that they feel they've got a stake in this and they're not just being told what to do? And the only way you do that is by just truly listening and caring. And this kind of goes back to this concept. I think you commented on my LinkedIn post last week about it, the golden rule of leadership versus a platinum rule. The golden rule of leadership is treat others the way you would want to be treated, but that's actually outdated. And the reality is, as a leader, is you need to treat others the way they want to be treated and lead in a way that's best for them to be led when it comes to the people aspects of this. And coaching and guiding comes back to how can I understand what the challenges are and the roadblocks are here
Yeah.
so that it's not just a cookie cutter approach, but it's what's going to work best for Matt? What's going to work best for Ryan to help them through this struggle that they're dealing with? And do I truly give a damn about them and want to see them successful, or am I just brushing them off to the side and say, they'll be gone in a month? Some leaders have that approach, and I respect that if it's that kind of system where you know it's more mechanical and it's plug and play. But when you're dealing with healthcare, when you're dealing with people that provide a service to humans, even outside of healthcare, because I have a lot of clients outside of healthcare too, you need to have your people know how to deal with people. And the best way to do that is to be a better listener, to be compassionate, be empathetic, but also understand it. What's in it for them, and what do I need to know about that, and how can I help?
Or I make a joke when I do HR presentations that unfortunately part of HR is you have to deal with the humans. It's not just resources. And I think that's true for leadership too. And there's so much to unpack there because there's really some really great things to unpack there. I first want to talk about this idea of being strength based in your
Hmm.
approach. You know, and when you're developing a team, when you're in that leadership role, it's above that management role. Because managers, you're basically managing process and making sure X gets done, Y gets done,
Hmm.
and everything's compliant. That's a leadership role, but it's management. When you get that
Right.
leadership, I think the key, shift there is that thing you said earlier. What's in it for me?
Hmm.
And that's when I think I evolved as a leader. When I started thinking about, okay, what value am I bringing to this person? You know, how am I making this person better? How can I make this person do more of what they're good at? You know, you joke around about feedback. We always like to give feedback to each other. That's such a word out there.
Hmm.
But in relationships, do you spend most of your relationships talking about what's wrong with someone or what they're doing well? If you started a first date and you said, hey, before we got on this date, I gave some feedback about the outfit, that's probably your last date, right? you know, but I think about that a lot, and so many leaders make that mistake. They focus in on what they're not doing well,
Yeah.
either from themselves or they focus on their team. And
Hmm.
having that approach that you just talked about, Ryan, what do you do well? What value can you learn here? That's amazing conversation. So,
Hmm.
your answer, I think, with that 40 people is we're going to figure out what's best for each one of them and do
Hmm.
that.
Yeah.
Wow. That's
And
pretty powerful.
getting through
Yeah.
that challenge, one of the reasons I was only in that role for a short time because I got an opportunity to come back to the healthcare system that I left to go start my business, which was a bigger opportunity for me. But in that short amount of time, we did a lot of things behind the scenes to make it a better environment for people. We had people change locations. We improved some aspects of team dynamics. We put in shared expectations in place. We came up with a team mantra. Just we rallied everyone together to say, how can we do this better? And me as a leader, I came in and saying, I'm here to listen. I'm here to understand, seek first to understand and then be understood. And I care about all of you and I want you to be successful. The only way I'm going to do that is by getting to know all of you, learning, leaning in, listening, and leading you the way you are best led. Um, and it really takes a lot of self-awareness to do that, self-awareness that I did not have 15, 20 years ago that I've been working on throughout my career to become more self-aware so that I can better deliver that for the people that I work with.
You bring up such a great point, and I saw this the other day, and it really kind of stuck with me. You take an athlete, or who spends half 95% of their time is training, practice, training, eating right.
Hmm.
But for let's say 5% of the performance. You go to those Olympic sports where they're sprinting. Think
Yeah.
of the years of work they have for a 10-second sprint. And they do that kind of work. Leadership, we take the complete opposite approach, right? We basically have people perform all year long, and hey, you know what, there's a 2 hour training this week on leadership development, or here's some HR policies for your review.
Right.
I think we undersell the importance of the services that you provide and other coaches and provide there. Really developing your team, coaching, providing those resources to get people better at leadership. So many leaders get put into a sink or swim situation. And you and I are not the only leaders out there who've kind of struggled with this transition. Almost every leader I've ever talked to would go back in a time machine and do things differently.
Yeah.
What approach do you bring as you come into an organization and you start talking about, developing leadership, developing structures? You know, how important is that for organization success? Like, what value are you bringing in your approach to really develop leadership and develop the organization?
Something that we touched base on earlier, if we kind of think about it in this scenario, like you're talking about, that emergency action plan approach to situational awareness, the only way things will change is that you sometimes have to unlearn and relearn. You sometimes have to break down barriers that are getting in the way of being able to move forward with new plans, new actions. And other times, maybe you just didn't allocate the right resources to stuff that would have worked before and need to rethink it and move it forward. And so when you think about that EAP approach to situational awareness as a leader, you need to anticipate those problems and you need to do that collaboratively with the team. It's not just me as a leader saying, here's all the problems we're going to face. It's talking with your team. All right, team, what do we want to avoid? Our goals are this. This is our vision. What's going to get in the way? Lay all those out. What are those potential challenges, those risks that we're going to face? It's not about creating fear and like fear mongering. It's about being strategic because you need to you base yourself in the reality. But then you also need to say, all right, now that we know these, let's plan for them. What resources are we missing? What education needs to happen? And when you talk about education, of course, there's full day workshops, half day workshops, which are very powerful because you can practically apply stuff. But that's only one component. Then there's micro learning. Then there's reinforcement after the fact so that it keeps going versus just being a drop in the pan. So that's really important as well too. When you have those plans, just like any strategy or approach, if you think of a big picture, you need to rethink those plans occasionally. You need to pivot if it's not working. Then you have to practice and prepare for it. So you have to practice the skills. When we talk about communication skills and we talk about active listening, we need to do active listening exercises. Or if we talk about developing empathy and compassion and being a compassionate provider, we need to be better at reading nonverbal body language. We need to be better at understanding and getting through the emotion of a message to what the true need is for the person that we're taking care of. And then you got to execute, and as a leader, it's holding your team accountable, but holding them to their best version of themselves. So holding them accountable, meaning, all right, as a team, we understood that this is the new standard. And if something's not happening with one of your team members, you come in and you have a conversation and you say, here's the standard that we all agreed upon. These are my observations. Help me understand why this is happening. What are the reasons? And let's work through it together because I care about you and I know you're capable of meeting that standard. So you're not calling that person out as a person. You're talking to the actions. You're talking about the actions and the observed findings that you're making as a leader versus placing blame and making that person feel belittled or demeaned or less of a person because they've made mistakes or something's not working out. Focus on the actions. And
What a great
then you go through
process.
that cycle again.
Yeah. I mean, what a great process. Again, but getting back to that theme of, visionary versus, rooted in what's going on,
Hmm.
that pillar there of, feet on the ground, head in the clouds. So many times in my experience, when projects fail, we go back and we kind of debrief them. There was something we missed
Hmm.
that was so obvious to a group of people, you know, that if we had more conversations, if we had more things like, why can't this happen? There's answers there. So what a great process. You really kind of do both there, and you get more buy-in that way. That's a great
Hmm.
change management strategy, great strategy for leadership there. Wonderful idea.
Yeah.
Um,
And Matt,
Brian,
think about the unexpected.
yeah,
How often, especially in healthcare, or any like how often do we have to deal with the unexpected?
Yeah.
And if you don't put those policies and procedures in place of that action planning and practicing and
Yep.
preparedness to focus on the known knowns and the known unknowns, you're going to be less likely to deal with the unknown unknowns, the stuff you didn't think of, the stuff that we never envisioned COVID happening. We
Yep.
wrote the playbook as we went along, you know. So there's inevitability that we're going to deal with those unexpected situations as a leader. But by being grounded in a time of crisis and still keeping your head in the clouds, but also being really rooted in that feet in the dirt mantra, but also because you've laid the foundation for your team with everything we've talked about already before. There's trust, there's psychological safety. People speak up. We can make mistakes. We learn from them and we regroup and we move forward. And when you have an environment, an awesome team environment and a culture like that, crisis will happen, unexpected will happen, but you figure it out quickly and you make it be less worse than it could be. And then you learn from that and end up, the silver
Less
lining
worse
is a
than it
lot of
could be.
those lead to something better, you
I like
know?
that phrase, less worse than it could be. I'm going to use that one a little bit.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a great one. But Ryan, but it's so true because there's a huge difference between solving the problem and solving a problem. When you're
Hmm.
able to solve a problem, you've built that foundation for an organization to be a learning organization through trust, all the things you talked about there. When
Yeah.
you can solve the problem, you're just looking at one problem, how we solve this problem, move on to the next problem. I think as leadership, the more you should focus in on is how we communicate, how we brainstorm, how we get feedback, how we get communication back from the floor and everything.
Yeah.
So you can solve a problem because you can't anticipate all the problems that come up there.
Hmm.
I mean, in this environment right now, whether it's executive orders, change in politics, economy, you can't solve all the problems facing leadership right now, but you
Right.
can be able to be structured as a problem. Um, I'd be remiss. I think you have one of the great names and concepts out there for catalyze. Can you talk about that for a minute or two, and then we're going to kind of go into our espresso round.
Okay, yeah, sure. So, the concept of catalyzing, a catalyst is something that creates a reaction in something else. Um, the concept of catalyzing is, my goal is to be a guide or to put someone in a position that they can be more successful by giving them that spark, but more importantly, helping them own their own spark that creates that positive reaction in the people around them, the stakeholders, the people that are involved in their daily lives. So when you think about being a catalyst, you can be a catalyst in a positive way. You can create positive reaction and the ripple effect in that way. There's also the negative out. You can be a negative catalyst. If you are a negative mindset and pessimistic and always being a detractor and complaining at work, you can be a catalyst in a not so good way too. So my focus is on the optimistic and the practical optimism and positivity, but also doing it in a realistic way. And I feel that if I can set myself in a position where I can provide feedback, coaching, education, guidance for other leaders out there to then make a bigger impact with what they bring to the table, that's where I'm fulfilled when I see those other people succeeding. When I saw people on my team getting promotions and getting raises and growing in their scope, that's what always just got me going, and I loved seeing
Yeah,
that. So that's kind of
absolutely.
where the foundation of catalyzing comes from.
I love it. I love the concept of it, and I love the idea. Are you being helpful or hurtful? Very basic question. One of my first leaders used to ask me all the time,
Hmm.
and ask all the people we work with, "Are you helping or hurting right now?" Great
Yeah.
question. And if you're a leader and you don't get joy out of when people succeed, you have to really look at whether you should be a leader because
Yeah.
that is the ultimate payoff when people get better because you work with them. That's your goal.
Hmm.
What a
Very
great,
true.
great summary of a great concept. I really love that concept there.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, Ryan, what a great journey you took us on today over a cup of coffee. I mean, amazing advice for leadership. Really talk about that middle management role, talk about visionary leadership, talk about all the things that you bring as a coach, a leader, and a consultant to help. If people want to get in contact with you and kind of talk a little bit further about your pillars, a little bit more about your approach, how do they get in contact with you?
No, I appreciate the opportunity, Matt. It's an honor to be chatting with you. And I too have so much respect for your background and your experience. So just being able to talk shop with you like this is just So it's so much fun, so much fun.
It has been. It's been
Um,
great.
yeah, absolutely. So, if, you know, I'm very active on LinkedIn. Absolutely can find me, Ryan Stevens, on LinkedIn. My website, www.catalyzingats.com. You can find me there across social media at catalyzingats. The AT stands for awesome teams. So, you know, keeping everything that I'm putting out there in mind of helping you create an awesome team environment in your workplace. Feel free to reach out. All of my contact is on those platforms. You can direct message me, shoot me an email, info@catalyzingats.com as well. Whatever your preference is. I'm very easy to get in touch with.
Very cool. Love the brand, love the message, and really I love the message again of being a leader for the people. I mean, it really is a great message and a great idea. And I love the idea of personal spark. And so you inspired me to think about a few things differently today. So I really appreciate that.
I actually I have a bracelet that I wear. Own
Okay.
your spark. It's just a reminder that I give this out as well to leaders that I come across, you know, who I see exhibiting that, where they're making a positive impact because they are self-aware and they are bringing
Yeah.
out, you know, their own best. This is just my reminder that, you know, I have the ability to make a difference and, you know, keep fighting, keep working for that.
It's a moment of sober reality when you realize that you have an influence on your own outcomes and
Hmm.
it's a maturity thing. And every once in a while, when people say it to me, I'm like, okay, you're right, I
Yeah.
get it. But it really is a great message. Okay.
Thank you.
Now we're moving to our favorite time of the day, our espresso round of questions.
All right,
So
let's do
we're
it.
yeah, we're gonna go through some quick hitter questions here. Ryan, best piece of advice you ever got over a cup of coffee?
First of all, it was over a beer
There you go.
because I didn't drink coffee in 2013.
There you
Um, so a really amazing gentleman, Thomas Blummer, who's one of the biggest, most knowledgeable fitness business gurus in the world. And 2013, I met him, first met him, and um, he said something that I'll never forget. Dream so big that you fart when you pick it up. And what that really meant was we are all capable of more than we realize. And
Yeah,
sometimes we have to try to do something even if there's a good chance that we won't succeed. And that meeting Tom and seeing his presentation and chatting with him was the reason that I started my very first blog because I wanted to make a difference and share my knowledge beyond just the organization I worked for and the people that I worked for on a daily basis. And then I figured out I hate writing long amounts of content. I'd rather talk and
yeah,
engage. So then the blog transitioned to a podcast in 2019. But yeah, that's probably, it still sticks with me to this day is you got to try. You don't know. And that
yeah.
comes back to hope. It comes back to optimism. You know, make your best plan, but you got to go for it.
Yeah, I'll jump in the pool. What great advice. So I will say this. I think some great advice over your life gets shared over beer and some really bad advice every once in a while too. Depends on the beers
Yep.
sometimes. But what great advice and really have the courage to start.
Hmm.
And I think that's a message that I've learned this year, last few years, and I've told many people is how you start this, you start and you
Hmm.
go from there and it evolves, it changes. But what great advice! So you gave some amazing advice to leaders during this last half hour. You have a cup of coffee with a leader right now. What's the one good piece of advice to give them over a cup of coffee for leaders out there?
If I had to pick one focus area just to kind of get right into, always remember what's in it for them. So, whoever you're leading, why are they bought into this mission? Why are they invested in coming to work? Why should they listen to what I'm asking them to do? Now, I just broke my own rule. I don't ask why questions. I ask what, when, how, where, and who questions. But that's the kind of concept is getting to the purpose of what's in it for them. And there's a lot of power in perception. There's a lot of power in their perception of your words and what you're asking them to do. That's way more powerful than you just thinking in my own head, this is what I want them to do, because they have to perceive it's important to do it. They have to perceive and believe in the reason behind doing whatever you're asking them to do in their job. So as a leader, my advice is, what's in it for them? And that comes down to empathy, compassion, and understanding and listening.
I will tell you that's such great advice. And one thing I would say in the last few years, I've really started to focus my communication on thinking about the audience wants to hear.
Hmm.
When you're writing a speech or you're writing a communication, it's not for you, it's for the people reading it.
Yeah.
And if you think about it from that perspective, it really does change things. And I remember going into big organizational changes, like when I worked as an HR leader or VP of operation leader, I would say to people, have any questions? It's okay to ask the question, how does it impact me?
Yeah.
And the people would ask that question, you can answer for them and really changes dynamics. Such great advice, Ryan. It's wonderful. As a leader, it's not about what you want to communicate, it's what they need to hear and what they
Hmm.
want to hear. Great advice.
Hmm.
Um, you can go back and talk to a younger Ryan over a cup of coffee. It might be, hey, start drinking some coffee. what advice are you giving yourself, a younger version of yourself?
Oh God, so much I would tell him. Um, Focus on what you can control. I early in my career, and even, into the early part of the last decade, um, I got so caught up in worry, in things that were outside of my control, what ifs. And there were many times where it kind of stalled me in my own growth. I got so focused on things outside of my control. And then I would worry over that. I'd get some anxiety over that. And it took a lot of personal work and therapy and all that good stuff to work through that, to focus, get back to the root of own your spark. Like, what can I control myself? Um, that absolutely was a game changer in terms of things being a tipping point for me to change my approach to what I do on a daily basis. And, I've it's been really kind of put to the test. I've had two people very close to me in life whose life ended at a very early age, family members. And when those happened, it really put it into perspective of, I don't know if I have another day tomorrow, so I'm going to make the most of this day today, and I'm going to control what I can, and I'm going to love the people I love the very best, so they know that I love them. I'm going to make sure my team knows that I'm here for them that day and be present, because you never know, you might not have a chance to tomorrow. So, um, of course, I think big picture and I think about the future, but I also focus on, I can't control that right now. So all I can do is control to set myself up for that.
It's amazing advice. I mean, if anyone follows me on LinkedIn knows I put this out there a few times. My favorites is Tom Petty, and he had a great line. Most of what I worry about never happens anyway.
Yep.
And I
Hmm.
will tell you that is so true for me. If I put in a bucket all the things I've worried about to actually what has actually happened, there's a lot more things that first bucket. And it's it's such a growth aspect if you can start getting to the point of what can I control? What can I do?
Hmm.
And really the core philosophy of just being mindful in that moment and being accepting of our reality of what
Hmm.
we can control, and then letting go of the others, whether it's
Hmm.
many different versions of that through religion, whether it's NAA the concepts or any kind of mindfulness training. It really comes down to that self-awareness of what you can control. Great advice. Great advice.
Thank you.
Last espresso round question. You can have a cup of coffee or whatever beverage you choose with anyone, anytime, any place, anywhere. Who you having that drink with?
Well, here and now it's with you, my friend. So
Oh,
I am
thank you.
appreciating that. Um, so many people in this world I would love to have conversations with, but when it boils down to my core, it's having a cup of coffee with my kids when they are adults, tailgating at a Penn State football game in the morning.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And seeing that they've become adults, God willing, that I'm still here with them, seeing that they've become adults, and hopefully I did something right, that they turned into something, something positive, and they're already just amazing, amazing humans. Um, but that's what it would be for me, is being able to have that cup of coffee with my kids when they're adults, and seeing what they've done with their life and where it's going.
Well, I will say a few things. First of all, I really hope that's an amazing vision. I hope that manifests itself and happens for you and you go there. Not none of them are wearing an Ohio State jersey while it's happening.
Oh, no,
So
no, that's not happening.
Um, Ryan, I want to really thank you for joining me here for a cup of coffee. You've shared such wonderful wisdom. I look forward to continuing to connect with you. Everyone out there, make sure you follow Ryan, an amazing leader, catalyst for growth and change individually and organizations. Amazing stuff out there. Ryan, thank you so much for joining. Everyone out there, till we have our next cup, thank you so much. See you all soon.
Fantastic. Have a great day.